How's it going, Mike?
It's going good. Welcome back. I missed you.
It's good to see you. I've been traveling a lot,
I know.
Going around the world,
New
spreading
Hampshire.
the ideas of liberty all over the country.
Although
That's what we do.
you were just up in New Hampshire at Pork Fest.
That's correct. Get closer to your microphone.
And there was...
Pointed at your mouth like that. There you go.
There you go. Figured out technology. I'm a dad now, so I'm a boomer. But Pork Fest had a lot of like-minded people.
Tell me about Pork Fest, Mike. What is that? What does that even stand for? Is it eating a lot of pork?
No, I don't think there's any pork there. I just know it's part of the Free State Project, which is this whole New
it's
Hampshire.
named for the porcupine, which is the mascot of the Free State Project and of the Libertarian Party. And it's a group of awesome libertarians who live in New Hampshire, and they're trying to kind of take over the state by just having all the libertarians move there. And I think that's a great idea. And they get together once a year, and they call it Pork Fest, and it's really cool. It's a campground up in the north of New Hampshire, and we all camp, and we all hang out and enjoy freedom together.
Now, New Hampshire, they have a lot of liberty-minded elected officials in their state legislature, but it's also, their state legislature is like somewhere between second and fourth largest legislative body in the Western Hemisphere or something.
In the Western Hemisphere,
it's an absurd number because it's essentially like your neighborhood has a House of Delegates member. So not too hard to win a seat, but they do have a lot of liberty-minded folks, I do know, in their state legislature.
Well, some people are trying to do like a political strategy where they get elected and take over the legislature. Some people are doing a more kind of agorist, like live your own life and just don't bother anybody kind of lifestyle up there, which I kind of like. And some people are doing a mixture of both. Some people are trying to do a cryptocurrency route, It's all a mix, but it's just like everybody agrees with each other. And it was so refreshing, having lived here in D.C. at the belly of the beast for so long and being surrounded by idiots. Going up there and meeting people who are just like chill and cool, and they're not insane, and they believe in freedom, and they just want to live their lives. It was like so refreshing because you tend to get into this mindset where you think, well, I must be crazy because I'm the only one. I'm surrounded by these people, and everybody thinks I'm nuts. Everybody has a completely different worldview than I do. And so having people who actually agree with me and are sometimes even more extreme than I am, if you can believe that, it makes you feel a lot more sane, which is pretty cool.
I can't believe anyone would be more extreme than you.
It's hard to find, but yeah.
Now,
I haven't been flagged for spreading harmful extremist content on Facebook yet.
Have you gotten the notice?
No, I haven't gotten it, which is really surprising to me.
That means you're the extremist.
I think it must mean that I'm the extremist. I'm a self-confessed extremist. I go on Facebook and say, yeah, we should abolish the government, peacefully, of course. But like that's pretty extreme. And they haven't flagged me. So
now, before we go any farther,
yeah,
let's pour what you brought to drink.
Oh, yeah. So I've been on a port kick lately. I think the port wine is the best wine. And a lot of people don't like it because it's too sweet. But I love port. And so I've been drinking a lot of port. So I brought some. I thought we could polish off this bottle and get into the next one in my shelf. Because I've got, like a couple years ago, I thought I had this bright idea where I was going to buy all these bottles of port and keep them in my wine cellar, which is a cupboard under my sink. It's not really a wine cellar. Keep them there for like 10 years and they would age and become so beautiful and so delicious. And then I've read that like port doesn't age in the bottle the way that wine does. So there's no point in doing that. So now I have
it doesn't go bad, does it?
It doesn't go bad, but it doesn't get any better.
Steady state.
So I've got all these bottles of port that I got to get through now. So
not a bad problem. I do love port as well.
We don't have the proper glasses, but we live by our own rules.
We do what we want. Bourbon for Breakfast, which is a great collection of essays by Jeffrey Tucker, who was also at Pork Fest.
He was there.
In his double-breasted suit.
Oh, always. He always dresses up.
That's more his neck of the woods now. He's up in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
When did you discover port? Do you remember? Was it a while ago or how?
Oh, man, I don't know. I think it was when my early drinking years when I wanted to try everything. It's like, if I'm going to drink, I want to drink everything that there is. And so I tried all the different liqueurs. I go to the liquor store and just pick out like random stuff just to see what it was like. And I think I eventually discovered port that way.
Impressive, and you discovered it in your early drinking years, because typically someone's early drinking years is Bud Light, Keystone, the worst.
No.
Liquor in plastic bottles.
Well, I my dad always drank Miller Lite growing up, so I had this idea that I hated alcohol and I didn't think it was good. And then when I was in college, I was introduced to like porters and stouts and good beers, and I was like, oh, this is what this is all about. I get it now. And so I became excited about drinking, and I wanted to try all the best of everything. I wanted to try all the different styles of alcohol because there's so many. So I tried brandy and I tried absinthe and like everything I could get my hands on. And so I tried a lot of weird stuff, and a lot of it I hated, but a lot of it I really liked. And port was something I liked.
Sure, sir. Yeah, the first port experience I ever had was actually probably 6-7 years ago. I was just dating my now wife.
Yeah.
We stopped by her uncle's home, and he is a parish priest. At the time, was at the church in Leesburg, Virginia. And the rectory there is actually, I believe it's Warren G. Harding's former hunting retreat. So it's a beautiful home on a lot of property. And we sat back, and he brought out, as a priest, you get many gifts from very well-off parishioners.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought out a bottle of port, and we sat in the back and just had dinner, drank the port after dinner, and it was amazing. And since then, I've always had a love for port.
Warren G. Harding was the 28th president, I think. Is that right?
Good. I would have to Google that to
I think
confirm.
he was 2 before Coolidge. So Coolidge is 30th. I think he's 28th.
I did know Coolidge was 30th. So yeah, good work. Way to work back.
I used to be able to do all of them immediately, and I've forgotten it. I haven't done it in so long.
There's actually a song. Did you learn the song when you were a kid?
No. Is it like the Elements song?
Yeah, it's kind of it's very similar.
Yeah.
Kathleen knows it. My wife. She's really good with songs.
I can do them all in order now, but like I have to, if I wanted to single out one and say what number president they are, it's harder for me now.
I usually work from Lincoln because I know he was 16.
Yeah.
Although that's good. 30 Coolidge. I did know that.
Yeah.
So the one question you just said too. Bring it back to Pork Fest. You said it's a collection of people that just want to live free and leave people alone. So I'm going to take it a little deep here.
Okay.
Do you think there's a calling or to spread the idea of the liberty culture, like to actually pursue it and push it in culture? And by not push it, I don't mean using the state by any means, but like, is there a duty or a sense of responsibility? Like there's one to say like, I'm just going to do my own thing. You do your own thing, or is there certain calling to go out and actually like spread the ideas of liberty?
I have kind of a moral aversion to evangelism. I don't like the idea of trying to force my ideas onto other people. I think you should, proudly display what you believe, and you should answer questions about it that people ask you and be, represent it well. But I like what we do at Free the People, put videos on the internet, say, here's what we believe. Great. But I don't like the idea of like going around and trying to say, this is the way you should live. This is the way you ought to live. It doesn't seem very libertarian to me.
Interesting.
I think there's a book in this somewhere.
There's no force to argue, to try to convince someone, though.
It's not force, but it feels a little aggressive to me to try to invade their mind and tell them your mind has to be like my mind. Like I've been thinking about this a lot in the last couple of years, and an idea I'm calling intellectual pacifism is what I'm calling it. And it's the idea of not trying to aggress with your ideas against other people. And I don't know, it kind of stems from my hatred of salesmen. And when I read in college, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I know a lot of people love, and I hated that book. I found it repulsive because it's all about how to like get people to do what you want them to do. And I'm like, I don't want to get people to do what I want them to do. I want people to do what they want to do. It feels very manipulative, and I really hate manipulation. And so I'm kind of toying with this idea of intellectual pacifism, and I think there might be a book in it, but I haven't figured out how to stretch it out to a book length yet because it's kind of a simple idea.
I mean, just that title alone would be intriguing.
It's a good title, right?
I think there's some truth to it. I don't know if I agree with that 100%. I think obviously being confident, wanting to discover what's true, and to know what's true, and to live what's true. If that's your joy, you also want someone else to discover what's true.
Yeah.
But then there's the temptation on the other side of that same coin where everyone needs to live the way I think they should live. And that leads down the slippery slope to totalitarianism. So there is something to be like, you should be able to live the way you want to live. Coming from the Christian perspective, we're called to go out into the world. But I've always kind of, to your point, not the evangelism, it's attested to him as a quote, St. Francis quote of Assisi, not the Pope, was to preach
the good St. Francis.
Yeah, the good St. Francis. Although I don't think I don't know if it really is a quote. It's like the Bastiat quote.
Yeah.
But it's preach the gospel at all times. When necessary, use words.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Live your life. You should reflect what you believe and just how you conduct yourself.
Well, it doesn't work anyway, right? Like I always say, you can't change someone's mind. They can you can only change your own mind. People can only change their own minds. You can't change other people's minds. And, you can sometimes make an argument that will persuade someone to change their mind, but you can't make them change their mind. It has to come from within. When you have revelations and you have ways of rethinking the world, it comes from within. And you get exposed to all these ideas and you take them in and you digest them and you chew on them and you figure out like what you believe, but it has to come from within. So the idea of like going out and saying, I'm going to make everybody change their mind and believe like I believe, I just think it's a doomed endeavor. It's not going to work.
The other side of it, so my kid's great-grandfather on my wife's great-great-grandfather or no, my wife's great-grandfather, my kid's great-great, he was a pretty powerful, big Catholic intellectual back in his heyday. And he actually used to go around with Frank Sheed, who was a big author. And they used to just set up boxes around Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Little makeshift platforms, stand up and start just randomly arguing why Catholicism is true and why you should be Catholic. Just pick a crowded place in D.C. in the 1940s, 1950s. Put yourself in a crate, stand up in the crate, and start just going at it, which I could never do.
I used to live in New York, and you see a lot of those guys in New York standing around, preaching from their soapbox to the crowds. How many people do you think they convert? What do you think their success rate is? Because I don't think it's anybody.
I think if you ask
I'd be amazed if they got one.
I think if you ask someone who did something like that, they say, if I could get just one, it would be worth it.
I bet they don't.
It's kind of like asking the author, like, who are you writing for? It's like, if I can convince just one person,
I bet they don't get one.
It would be worth it. You don't think so?
I've never changed my mind because of something someone yelled at me from a street corner.
I did think one time I was on Bourbon Street at 2 a.m. and there was a street preacher in the middle of Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
And it was a little like, I already was kind of weirded out at Bourbon Street at 2 a.m. I was like, this place is already kind of weird.
Yeah.
And then you had the street preacher preaching repentance, and it kind of added to the whole, and kind of a very tension there. But I agree with you. I don't know how many they convinced, but I am impressed that someone had the courage just to slap the platform down and stand up in it. So, yeah. So, long-winded discussion there to that thought. Just how much are we called to just retreat and live your life versus going to
I don't think it's a
society
retreat necessarily, but I do think it's a lead by example sort of thing versus trying to preach. I think that's a better way to do it,
I agree. It's just so often.
And I've really become kind of dismayed at the prospects of using politics to solve the problem. I used to, we used to work at Freedom Works, and we used to get involved in elections and try to get people elected. And it's just like, I don't really think it works.
I don't either.
I think that power is so corrupting that you get a couple good guys in, you get Rand Paul, you get Thomas Massey, but so many people that we got elected at Freedom Works ended up not being good liberty guys in the long run, because the power is just so corrupting. And you can't get people to vote for someone unless they agree with them in the first place. If you're trying to get someone to vote for someone they don't agree with, you're trying to trick people and deceive them, which is no good. But so really the battle should be, get people to agree with the ideas before you get involved in politics. Because if people don't agree with the ideas, there's no point in trying to get them to vote for someone. Otherwise, you're just being dishonest. And so I'm kind of dismayed at the whole prospect of using politics, especially at least not right now, when most Americans don't really agree with libertarianism and are not in a place where they're willing to accept it. We got to get them there first before we try to get them to vote for people.
Change culture.
Change the culture. Yes, that's right. Because culture is upstream of politics.
All that free. I heard an argument. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole again.
Let's do it.
Recently about that. I certainly subscribe to culture's upstream of politics.
Yeah. And
politics are just a reflection of the current culture.
Yes.
I heard someone that I respect intellectually, Ryan Anderson. He's certainly more of the conservative bent. He is the president of a think tank in D.C., as so many people are. But he was trying to present the argument that, yes, culture is upstream of politics, but the two feed each other in a way, or more of a back and forth. And he unfortunately, he didn't go too far in to elaborate it, but I have enough respect for him as an intellectual that at least made me pause and think, is that true? I think politics, I firmly believe politics can erode culture.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if it can build it up, but I was like, can it? And
I don't really think so, personally, because like I said when we had John Schweppe on, you can't make people be virtuous at the point of a gun. You can't use force to instill virtue in people, and that's what politics is. It's force. Yeah. So I don't really buy it. But it reminds me of the argument George Orwell always made about language, saying that language determines thought, and if you change the language, you change the way people think. And that's sort of true, but it's also sort of not true. And I've always had a little bit of a problem with Orwell's conception of that, because we are able to have thoughts that we are not able to articulate because we don't have the right words for them. And that's how new words are invented. We have a thought that we don't have a word for, so we make up a word. So I think thought influences language far more than language influences thought. Now, language does influence thought to a certain degree. And you see it in foreign languages that have different words for things, or they lack words for things that we have words for. That certainly happens. But I also think it's more important that the thought influences the language rather than the other way around. I don't think if you just abolish the word for something, you're going to abolish the thought. And this is what you see with the euphemism treadmill, where they say, oh, we're going to get rid of this offensive word because we don't like the thought behind it. And people just come up with a new word for the same thought. And it just cycles over and over again. It never works. So I guess to answer your question, oh, look, there's someone here.
Yeah, Matt was speaking up
That's
in
nice.
the studio.
Hi, Matt. I guess to answer your question, politics probably does feed culture to a certain extent, but I think culture feeds politics so much more than the other way around.
And I don't think you can elect people that have the right values. I don't think that you have no chance in hell of electing people that have the right values in quotations. Whatever you
let's
determine.
keep the language tame for the audience here.
Whatever
My
you
children listen to
Oh,
this
sorry.
show.
Yes, it's family friendly here.
Yeah.
Whatever you determine the right values are for, if the culture doesn't hold those values.
Yeah.
I mean, there seems to be some preconception of both the modern left and the modern right that, hey, we'll just put the right people in office, they'll make the right policies, and then culture will change. I'm like, well, where are these people coming from? They're coming from culture.
Yeah. I mean, you wanted to talk about Biden's like family incentive plan, which is a great example of how they're trying to use politics to kind of instill certain values in people and how it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
And just completely fails. So go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, Biden has rolled out, the Biden administration, so I doubt Joe Biden had much to say about any of it.
I would be pretty surprised.
More does he think about it? He's usually thinking about his ice cream cone that I saw with chocolate chips on it. But it's a plan, a massive expansion of the welfare state that includes things such as like all-day pre-K, paid family leave, paid sick leave, and the whole argument is, there has to be a safety net for families, which, they're trying to argue as pro-family.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also been language by some of the people in the Biden administration is we want women to feel like women should be in the workforce because that's where they're fulfilled. And then
that certainly depends on the woman, doesn't it?
it's a one size fit all, right?
Yeah.
It's like all women are fulfilled in the workforce. The data actually does not sit well with that at all.
Yeah. I feel like that's just wishful thinking on their part. It was like, we want women to be fulfilled in the workforce, so we're just going to declare that they are.
It's our mindset of the GDP is the most important thing in the world. So we'll just get as many people in there. The conservative side, or more of like the common good side, or the big government conservatives have come in and say, whoa. Yes, let's expand the welfare state. But the goal is we want all women to stay home. And that's where they'll find fulfillment, and it's actually better for the children. Now, I might personally agree with that, but again, you're putting everyone into one.
Yeah, maybe we should let
one
people
blanket.
decide for themselves what fulfills them. Find their own path to fulfillment instead of imposing something on all of them.
I didn't know all women decided it. And yes, I think a culture would be better if more mothers were at home with their children, especially in the early stages. But
I think a culture would be better if more parents were home with their children.
Yeah. I mean,
regardless of whether traditionally it's the mother.
Traditionally it's the mother.
Like, as long as I think one parent, having one parent home and spending time with the child is great. And I don't really care if it's the mother or the father.
I agree with that.
I think someone should be there to help raise the kid, because someone's got to raise the kid. And if the parents don't raise the kid, the government's going to raise the kid.
And that's what the Biden plan does do for those who would oppose it. It just allows more government schooling, which is already a mess. So it's a philosophical argument, but also it doesn't leave any choice. Both sides are putting everyone to a one-size-fits-all. There's no plurality of choice. And I think it's just a bad philosophy that both sides have in a way.
The universal pre-K stuff is like really upsetting to me, because I'm kind of anti-school in the first place.
Yeah.
And like the idea that you're going to put kids in school as soon as they're born, pretty much at this point, they pop out of the womb and you just stick them in a government institution to take care of them until they're 18. It seems really insidious to me. And I think the motives behind it are very insidious. I think they want to indoctrinate. They want to like raise the kids the way they want to raise the kids. And if the parents have a different idea, too bad. I think it's a really bad idea.
There's certainly a thought that the government knows best, or accredited teachers somehow are more informed than parents of their own children to how they should be raised. The other problem that I have with both sides is they both want people to make a certain choice, and they're going to use policy to try to incentivize that choice, which I reject from the beginning. I don't need, of course, if you write me a $12,000 check annually, which is what Josh Hawley wants to do, and put in my bank account, I'm not necessarily going to be upset about that $12,000 showing up. It certainly would help me. But I have certain values. I have 3 children. There's going to be more children. We already cut my income in half by my wife staying home. We're going to homeschool. I'm making certain sacrifices where I'm not going to have as many material things in my life. I'm not going to have as many choices. But it's because I have a certain value set. I don't value those material things, where even if you hand a working married couple an extra $12,000 a year, who says the woman's going to be like, I want to stay home?
Well, they're trying to buy obedience, and it reminds me of this argument that the left always makes, where they talk about how, like, oh, workers have no choice but to work for these jobs because the corporations dangle money out in front of them and they have to do it. And, I'm like, well, they do have a choice. They don't have to do that. And I'm not persuaded by that argument. But you'd think people who would make that argument would also be persuaded by the argument that, like, government is taking away people's choices by dangling this money out in front of them and saying, oh, well, yeah, you can take this money and then we're going to pull the strings and tell you how to raise your kids and you're going to have to deal with that. And it's a tempting offer to a lot of people. There was just a Washington Post article which features our friend and colleague Joel Davis and his restaurant, Marv's Place. If you're in northern West Virginia or southern Ohio, I highly recommend Marv's Place. But it's a really snotty article about how all these West Virginia people and Southern Ohio people have taken all the stimulus money, but they're still Trump supporters and they're still against Biden and they're still for small government. And it tries to paint them all as hypocrites and it tries to paint them all as like hicks and yokels and stuff. And I thought it was an offensive article, but like that's what they're trying to do is they're trying to buy people's obedience by saying, take your stimulus money and then you'll be a good little citizen and you'll do what we tell you to do. Otherwise, we'll take away your stimulus money. And that's a really dangerous path to go down, I think.
I didn't read the article, but were they baffled? Like, first, I don't think Trump was anyway a advocate of small government.
No, I don't think so either.
And he never claimed to be. And he signed multiple stimulus bills that gave these people this money, whether that was what he truly thought was right or it was election year, so do what you got to do to win the election.
Right.
But were the authors of the article shocked that the people still were
I don't think they were surprised, but I think that they were trying to make them look like hypocrites, and they were trying to make them look dumb. And they were saying, look, these people are benefiting from Biden's government handouts, and yet they're still against Biden. How stupid they are. And it had all these things about like how they're like, oh, they're spending their stimulus money on tobacco and, tried to make them look really uneducated and backwards and stuff, I thought. it was a really snotty article. I wasn't a fan of it.
Same par for Washington Post.
Yeah, like they're very superior elitist, like East Coast elitist type thing.
The elites, and I think all of us in general, maybe it's human nature, I don't know, we struggle as a species with comprehending other people's choices.
Yeah.
And we just can't let it go.
It's so true. Like other people have different priorities than we have. And instead of just saying, oh, well, they have different priorities than I have, you have to say, no, your choices are wrong. You should make the same choices I make. And it's just not the case.
And we get so bent out of shape that we run off as a group and write a law to try to keep you from making the choice or want to somehow incentivize you to make the choice we think you should make. It baffles my mind.
It's something I've never been able to relate to either because I don't get it, I feel like I don't really care what other people do with their lives. Do whatever you want. If it makes you happy, go for it.
You should have enough confidence in just whatever you've chosen to just be able to live your life. I'm going to do what I want to do. I think these decisions are best for me. I don't care if you approve or disapprove. I don't care if you align your life with me or don't align your life with me. And yes, as a Christian, I also recognize the calling to go out and say, hey, I actually think if you follow these people always say Christianity has a lot of rules. I think they're pretty limited.
Not as many rules as Judaism.
Yeah, if you follow these rough guardrails for your life, it'll be a lot better. But
it's a lot like the pirate code guidelines.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I love the great book. I'll drop it in here. Invisible Hook on Pirates and Economics.
Rawr.
But anyways, the whole point is to freely just choose it. I don't know.
Yeah.
You should be able to walk away and be like, not threatened by someone else's choices, but for some reason we are threatened by other choices.
Well, it's almost an evolutionary thing, and I'll do a shameless plug for my book, which is getting ever closer to coming out now. Conform or Be Cast Out, The Literal Demonization of Nonconformists, in which I talk about how it's an evolutionary thing to want to punish the people who do things differently, because if you live in a tribe of 20 people and one guy's like, I don't want to go hunt and forage, I'm going to go carve cave paintings into the walls instead. It's like, well, that guy's not contributing to the good of the tribe, and so you got to punish that, or else you're all going to die and starve to death. So it's kind of understandable that we got to this point where we have an instinct to punish nonconformists. But I think it's really bad because the only way you make any progress in civilization and in life is to do something differently. If you do the same things over and over again, you're going to get the same results over and over again. And you have to have someone who's crazy enough or weird enough or different enough to try something new in order to create something new and increase productivity, increase wealth, come up with a new invention, come up with a new artistic form. Everything that makes life great has to be created by someone who decided to do things differently. And so that kind of collectivist instinct to punish nonconformism is really damaging to civilization. But it's kind of understandable where it comes from, because in the very early stages of civilization, it could be dangerous.
Prerequisite is freedom for that.
Yeah.
You have to let people be free to make decisions. I feel like there's a lot of empathy behind that. Like, it's almost, I don't understand you, but I've been in that situation before.
It helps if you're just not interested in other people very much, which is where I get a lot of it from, you know? I just don't really care what you do. It's not interesting to me. I'm going to let you do your thing. The problem is you get people who are really interested in what their neighbors are up to.
Yeah.
And then they get involved. And it's like, well, it's none of your business. Mind your own business.
No,
Get a hobby.
Yeah.
Become a bird watcher.
My wife, who is the sweetest person in the world, she is pretty non-confrontational. She just wants, I call her the diplomat. She just wants everyone to get along.
Yeah.
But she...
Do you call her the diplomat, like, within your family at the dinner table?
No,
like,
whenever
children wait for the diplomat to get here before we eat.
Anything comes up, she wants to avoid confrontation. She wants to bridge peace, which is great. So I was like, oh, you're just being a diplomat. Yeah. And I rather burn the place to the ground at times. So if
I'm that way too. Like, I'm going to stand on principle, and if it means I'm immolated in the process, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so we're like-minded there. But she also, as she's a very caring, loving person, to where it literally like aches her inside if she sees another human being making decisions that are obvious to anyone else who's looking. They're harming their life. So just easy, like the heroin addict who's going to kill themselves.
Yeah.
That like breaks her heart, like crushes her. And she's like, no, people should not do heroin because this person is a beautiful person who deserves a great life. And it crushes her. But I try to tell her, you have to get to the point where if the person who's addicted to heroin and is seriously struggling reaches out for help, you're like, I'm there to help. Reach by the hand, or I'm going to help you get to the person help if I can't. But you also get the person where if they want no help, this will sound really cold-hearted, you have to step over them and just walk by and not think about it.
Yeah, you can't help people who don't want help. We interviewed a guy at Libertarian National Convention a couple of years ago, and he was saying he was a disability advocate. He was saying they have a saying in the disability advocacy circles. It's like, not for me without me. And so the idea is like, don't help people without consulting them on what they want first, because like they have a voice, and just because they're disabled doesn't mean they don't have opinions about what should be done for them. And so people tend to want to be this white knight and go in and charge and help everybody. But it's like, well, like consult with me first about what I actually want before you try to take an advocacy stance for me, which I think is a really good principle in general, not just for disability advocates.
That's why I think the welfare state fails overall. We just group all people who are below this line where we decided arbitrarily, like, if you make less than this, you're in welfare and you need this. Instead, I think any kind of help to people in need should be given as local as possible, because one person might actually need financial money. Another person might have some addiction you don't understand that's harming them.
Financial money is the best kind of money.
And you don't know how to treat, every person's an individual. And if you don't know the individual, you shouldn't bother yourself trying to treat the individual.
I agree with that.
And responsibility should be handed to the people closest to that. First, the individual, the family, the community, and so on and so forth.
Well, our camera is about to cut off, so let's leave it there for today, and then we can do another episode maybe.
Yeah. Cheers.
Because I'm still thirsty.
Port.
I don't know about you.
I want more port. So
cheers.
Cheers, sir.